Hi everybody. I want to talk to you guys about the thesis statements for your book analysis. First of all, make sure that you have gone through all of the documents underneath the book analysis button on the left-hand side of the screen. There are many sample book analyses for you. There are tips. There's also a video of me just talking your ear off about why we're doing this paper, why it matters, and what exactly it is that I'm looking for. So please make sure that you have gone ahead and done all of that. I understand that some of you may not have had English 101 or that you may not have had it in many years. So I wanted to do a quick refresher of the thesis statement and why it's so important. You'll see at the top of your discussion boards that there is a discussion board there now for you to post your thesis statement for me to approve before you continue on with your book analysis. This is a mandatory forum. You must post for this before or by the deadline stated in the discussion board for this. I want to do this so that I can help you. I'm not trying to be nasty. I'm trying to be helpful for you. So let's talk a little bit about what thesis statements are. So the thesis statement tells the reader how you, so you being the author of the paper, are going to interpret the subject of the paper. Okay, it's a roadmap for the paper, and so it tells me, the reader, what I'm going to expect as I'm reading. So it's like a signpost. It sets up where the paper is going to go. And it also can help you as the author as an organizational tool. It's pretty much the spine of your paper. All arguments, all other paragraphs, all supporting details connect back to this primary thesis statement. So it is not a topic. So it's not like, I'm going to write about plot. Okay, it's not a topic like that. It's an argument, something that you can dive into, support, and defend. It is not a statement of fact. So you can't argue, interpret, or defend a fact. So an example of a factual statement, William Faulkner wrote the book As I Lay Dying. Okay, that is true, but you can't really go anywhere from that. That's not telling me anything new, revealing, insightful about the text itself. So what a thesis statement is usually a single sentence. In more complicated assignments, it can go on longer than that. But for our purposes, it's usually a single sentence in the introductory paragraph that presents the argument to the reader. And so then the rest of the paper, all the rest of your paragraphs and supporting details and in-text citations, gather and organize the evidence that will persuade me, the reader of your paper, the logic of your argument. So the logic of what you're interpreting about the text. Okay, your assignment is a craft-based book analysis. So again, make sure that you have gone through those sample book analyses. This is not a paper that's a book report. It's not a plot summary. It's not, you're not reading it as a critic, saying I liked it, I didn't like it, here's why. None of that is relevant for this paper, and I talk more about that in the other video that's posted under the button. For most of you, this is probably a brand new way of doing a paper about a text. Okay, this is not the same kind of approach that we use in literature classes. In literature classes, you're looking at a text through a very different lens. What I'm trying to do with this assignment is to help you guys look at a piece of literature from the perspective of a writer. So you're kind of trying to figure out, what did they do? What kind of, how did they work with dialogue? How did that pacing get pulled off? How come that description was so effective? Whatever craft element it is that you're focusing on, by looking at it through a full text, that helps you understand that craft element better, and it very much improves your writing and reading ability. But I do know that this is probably a very brand new approach to looking at a text for most of you, and that's another reason why I need to make sure that I approve your thesis statements, so to make sure that you're on the right track. Okay. As I just said, this is not a book report or a plot summary. I'm asking you to read like a writer and to examine your novel of choice through a single craft element. So you could do more than one craft element, but that does get much more complicated and it's easy to run off the rails. Okay, this is not a terribly long paper, 3 to 5 pages. So make sure that you can focus and actually go into some depth If you take on too much, it's going to be very difficult for you to handle within the parameters of the assignment. And again, please take the time to read the sample book analyses under the book analysis button. Those were all written by students in this class at various times over the last 7 or 8 years. Take the time to watch the video that I made about the book analysis, also under that book analysis button. And remember, you're not reading your book as a critic. It doesn't matter if you liked the book or not. Okay, that's really important. It doesn't matter if you liked it or not. I don't want to read anything like that in your paper. Okay, you're focused entirely on what the author did, the construction of the text. Okay, and the reason it's so important that you keep whether or not you liked the book or not out of the paper is because I'm wanting to teach you about how craft works. Everyone's got preferences. Absolutely. Everyone does not love the same kind of books. You may have chosen a book and it's just not resonating with you. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, every book does not speak to every reader, but every book on that list does craft really well. Okay. I mean, I'm no different. I don't like all kinds of books, all genres, all everything. I have preferences too. But my job as a teacher is to not look at, like, say, your work and say, oh, I can't stand stories about XYZ, so I don't know how to help you. That's not very helpful to you, okay? And it's actually kind of rude. So what I focus on and what I try to teach all my students to focus on is the craft element, because that's what you can be helpful with, and that's what the writer can adjust. You know, it's not up to us to ever make value judgments about another author's subject matter. That's between the author and the author's muse, or, you know, wherever you think the source of creativity comes from. So again, I do understand that this is likely a brand new approach to looking at a text for most of you. Okay, that's why the paper is so short. And it's why we're taking so much time to break it apart and help you, construct it in a way that's going to work. Okay, thesis statement samples. This first batch is from a memoir class that I have taught here. And so these are all student statements. So they're not perfect, but they're really good, and they illustrate what it is that I want you guys to focus on. Okay, so this first page is from Joan Didion's memoir, The Year of Magical Thinking. And just an FYI, this particular template that I was using for the PowerPoint will not let me italicize. So book titles should be italicized or underlined. All right, so number 1. In her memoir, The Year of Magical Thinking, Joan Didion uses specific detail to demonstrate her grief and mourning after her husband's death. All right, so this contains the title of the book, The Year of Magical Thinking, the author's name, Joan Didion, what the craft element is, specific detail, and then what effect that detail had on the text, okay, or what it is that that detail is doing. So that final part of that sentence, to demonstrate her grief and mourning after her husband's death, is the argument the whole paper is making. So then that paper's trajectory is focused on specific detail within that text and how that detail illustrates mourning and grief. Okay, example number 2. In The Year of Magical Thinking, Joan Didion uses repetition and straightforward language to describe the loss of her husband. Okay, same basic topic here that the student is working with. We got the title of the book, we have the author's name, we have the craft element, repetition, and straightforward language. So that's a stylistic choice. And what is that doing? That's describing the loss of her husband. So this paper is going to be focused on how those two elements, repetition and non-flowery or simple language, helps to illustrate the loss of Didion's husband. And then the final example from this book, in The Year of Magical Thinking, Joan Didion uses repetition as a narrative technique to emphasize the circular, recurring process of grief. Got the book title, got the author's name, we have the craft element, repetition, and then this statement is the most sophisticated of the three, uses repetition as a narrative technique to emphasize the circular, recurring process of grief. So this student was claiming that Didion choice of using so many repetitive ideas, images, moments was a way to help the reader also feel kind of that whirlpool, that trap that you can get in when you're going through the grieving process. Okay, this is another memoir, Angela's Ashes. So in Angela's Ashes, Frank McCourt uses the techniques of dialogue to create enough humor to help us swallow the tragedies of the protagonist's poverty. So book title, Angela's Ashes, author Frank McCourt. The craft element, dialogue. What is that dialogue doing? It's creating humor within, and this is a very dark text. There's a lot of tragedy going on in this text. So the dialogue, according to the student, is helping to create humor that helps the reader enter into such a dark world, helps the reader enter into the tragedies of this protagonist. Number 2 on this page. In his book, This Boy's Life, Tobias Wolff seeks to reveal Jack's ongoing desire to fit in or belong to something through the use of characterization and specific detail. Book title, This Boy's Life, author Tobias Wolff. What is he doing? This one's reversed. So the craft element here is characterization and specific detail. It's at the end of this sentence. What is it doing? It's helping to reveal Jack's desire to fit in or belong. Okay, so Tobias Wolff is using characterization and concrete detail to illustrate Jack's need to fit in. So we have all the same elements there in that sentence. They're just stated in a little bit different order. And this final one is from the memoir, The Glass Castle. In The Glass Castle, Jeanette Walls presents the factual truth of situations by using the craft techniques of dialogue and description. She delivers a naked and unbiased description of her family life. Walls steps away from providing an analysis of her life and lets readers determine for themselves the emotional truth. Okay, so this one is much more complicated, but it contains all of the elements that we are looking for. She's got the craft elements here, dialogue and description, and although she's broken this apart into 3 different sentences, this is essentially the thesis argument for this paper. By using dialogue and description, she is able to step away from what we call author intrusion, step away from what the author is trying to interpret about the text and let the reader in and make the conclusion. So you may have seen on some of my comments to you on your packets, don't tell us so much. Don't sum up the meaning. Let the reader make the meaning. That's one of the great joys of reading. We don't want to take that away from a reader. And so that's what this is all about. And again, I know this is from a different class, so these are not necessarily terms that I'm expecting you to know at this point. But this was a way that you can present a thesis argument in more than one sentence. And so I wanted to be sure to show you that. Okay, this one's from a creative nonfiction class, and this book, this is Truman Capote's book In Cold Blood. And this was the concluding sentence in the intro paragraph. So in the beginning of the paragraph, the student had already referenced the book title. But even with the gut-wrenching and powerful details of the crime, Truman Capote still manages to make the murderers seem human by using impacting, thought-provoking character development. Okay, so again, this is from In Cold Blood, and our craft elements here are thought-provoking character development, so characterization. Okay, so Capote is using characterization to make the murderers seem like human beings. And then the paper then went on to explain how that worked, focused on characterization, and then the effect of characterization, making these cold-blooded killers seem to be quite human and accessible. Okay, and then this is a book from the list for y'all's class that a student did. And this is a little bit long and a little bit wordy, but it does have everything that we need. So we have Cormac McCarthy's post-apocalyptic drama, The Road, shows the story of a father and his son fighting each day the battle of surviving the bitter cold, earthquakes, cannibals, and thieves in an unforgiving and merciless new world. He breathes life into these two characters, giving the road its miraculous appeal to the human heart and allowing the light and love of the father and son's relationship to take center stage by reducing the desolate settings, brimming with death and monstrosity, into a mere backdrop. This, along with McCarthy's unconventional use of grammar and structure, present to us a different yet universal, sobering yet uplifting look at human nature. Okay, so again, this is a little bit wordy. The student's kind of getting a little bit tripped up in all of the images that he wanted to put in there, but it's nonetheless a sophisticated approach to this text. So we have our book title, we have our author. Look at the end here. So the word "this" is referring to what came before it. So it's referring to how the setting, as awful as it is and as much tragedy and trauma as is going on in that setting, it merges to the background. It's not what's important about the book. What's important about the book is the father and son's relationship. And so that, combined with then the unusual, unconventional use of grammar and structure within that book, helped to create this light, well, that's probably not the right word, this uplifting look at human nature. Okay, so again, this is much more complicated, but it does have the elements that we want to have in our paper. So here is a template that you can use. Okay, you don't have to use this, but if this is kind of blowing your mind and you're like, I don't know what to do, this will get you where you need to go. So thesis statement template. Author X did Y, which created Z. That will give you all three elements that you need to know. X is the author's name, Y is the craft element. So dialogue, point of view, setting, description, pacing, tension, all of those things that you can even, kind of thumb through the Gotham book and see the chapter titles. That'll give you a whole bunch of ideas of what craft elements are. And then Z is the effect of that craft element on the text. So author X did Y, which created Z. Okay, you do not have to use that literally, but that is a great, great starting place for you to make sure that you're addressing everything that you need to do. Okay, so the thesis statement is the central argument of the paper. It contains the what, the craft element, and the effect, the why or the how elements of your argument. You can't write your thesis statement until you actually know what craft elements you want to examine. That's why I posted that schedule pretty early in the semester of a suggested way to approach this assignment. So you should be well into your second reading of your book by now, looking at how the craft element that you chose, whether it was point of view or setting or characterization, how that is being utilized within the book. You have to know that before you can write the paper. You have to know what it is you want to write about so that you know how to then go back and look at the text through that lens. Okay, this is not a paper that you can do in one evening. That's why we started it pretty much in week 3. Okay, so I strongly suggest picking one, and that's one craft element. So not 2, 3, 4, etc. It will just help you focus much better. Okay, you need to post your thesis in the thesis statement board. So you'll see a discussion board for you to post your book analysis thesis statement when you click on discussion boards. The due date for that board is posted right there on the left column in blue, like all of our due dates have been. This is mandatory. If I do not approve your thesis statement, you cannot turn in your book analysis. And the book analysis is worth 25 points. So that's 10 points more than a single packet. Okay, this paper is that important. Now, you have to post the thesis statement to the board on time, but it's okay if you still have to do work on it. Okay, so I'll go through and I'll make comments on everybody's thesis statement. I'll say, yes, you're absolutely on the right track, or I'll say, no, you need to consider this or that. Please repost. Okay, and that's fine, and that's what that board is for. But you need to make sure that you post that statement on time. So why am I making you do this terrible thing? I'm making you do this terrible thing because, number one, I want to make sure that you're on track with the paper. I don't want you to turn in a paper in November or at the end of the semester and go, why isn't this right? So we want to break this apart and be sure that you're on the right track before you get too far. So I'm going to be making sure that, you have a statement that will work for the purposes of this assignment. Is it a craft-based thesis statement? So go back to that template if you're stuck. Author X uses Y to create Z. Okay. Lots of students will, their first draft of the statement will end up being more of a literary criticism. That's not unexpected, since that's the way most people have been writing papers in English classes for 10 years. But again, we're in a writing class, we're in a creative writing class, and I want you to look at the tools the author used to make the text. So you're reading like a writer. So I'm looking to make sure that that statement is craft-based. Is your statement too broad? Or is it too narrow? Is it clear? Is it complete enough to allow you to explore the idea without being so overwhelming that you can't possibly find focus? So the thesis statement is the anchor for the whole paper. Once you've nailed it, you'll know how to organize the rest of the paper. The body paragraphs are simply then the exploration of the argument that you've established with your thesis statement. Your in-text citations will support your argument. Okay, so the paper requires in-text citations from the primary source. So that primary source is the book itself. Those citations should be helping to support the stance that you're taking in the thesis statement. Okay, and I'm reviewing these statements to help you, my darlings, while you still have plenty of time to rework and revise before the due date. Okay, so I'm doing this because I'm friendly and because I care. I hope that you have found this beautiful presentation helpful, and I look forward to seeing your statements on the boards.